Dark clouds loomed over the Fulton County Superior Court, casting an ominous shadow on the morning proceedings. The tension inside the courthouse buzzed like static in the air, charged, volatile, and ready to strike. Few of the bystanders entering courtroom 4D that rainy morning could have guessed that they were about to witness a confrontation powerful enough to shake the very core of the judicial system. At the defense table sat a young black woman, composed and graceful in a tailored gray suit. Her eyes were steady, her demeanor calm. To the casual observer, she appeared to be just another defendant, but appearances deceive. This woman, Ebony Jacobs, was no ordinary citizen. She was the newly appointed chief legal advisor to Governor Alexander McKinley, and she was about to expose a dangerous judicial bias hiding in plain sight. Just hours earlier, Ebony had left a late-night strategy meeting at the state capitol in downtown Atlanta. As the governor's top legal aide, she had been working tirelessly on proposals for criminal justice reform, her passion project. Years of witnessing racial disparities in the legal system had fueled her mission to bring transparency and equity to the courts. Driving home in the dark, her laptop bag beside her, Ebony took the familiar, winding road toward her modest townhouse on the city's outskirts. The first sign of trouble came in the form of flashing red and blue lights flooding her rear-view mirror. Her heart quickened. She hadn't broken any laws. Her registration and insurance were valid. She wasn't speeding. And yet, experience had taught her that being in the right often meant little for black drivers pulled over without cause. Officer Reinhardt, a stout white man with a rigid demeanor, approached her vehicle, his eyes already clouded with suspicion. Before he could speak, Ebony rolled down her window and politely handed him her license and insurance card. Despite her professionalism, she could feel the distrust radiating from him. Then came the barrage of questions. Where she'd been, where she was going, who she worked for, and why she was out so late. Ebony answered each one clearly and firmly. But when she mentioned the governor's office, Reinhardt's expression darkened. Whether he didn't believe her or couldn't stomach the idea of a black woman holding such a powerful position, something shifted. What should have been a routine stop dragged on. Suddenly, Reinhardt claimed to smell alcohol in her car, an unfounded accusation. Ebony, calm but resolute, declined his request to search her vehicle, invoking her Fourth Amendment rights. That refusal seemed to trigger him. Moments later, Reinhardt ordered her out of the car, accusing her of resisting an investigation. Though her indignation surged, Ebony held her composure. She stood on the shoulder of the highway, arms crossed, as the officer rifled through her belongings, dumping her legislative drafts and legal notes across the seat. She hadn't wanted to play the "I work for the governor" card. She believed in the system, believed that if she cooperated, justice would prevail. But the officer's irritation only grew as he found nothing incriminating. Finally, Ebony looked him in the eye and asked, "Am I free to leave?" Reinhardt hesitated, his face flushed with frustration. He stammered, unsure how to proceed now that his assumptions had unraveled. What he didn't yet know was that the woman he tried to intimidate would soon be sitting across from his department in a much different context, with the full weight of the governor's office behind her. Before Ebony could even process what was happening, Officer Reinhardt snapped a pair of cold steel handcuffs around her wrists. He recited her Miranda rights in a flat, almost robotic monotone, as if this moment meant nothing. But to Ebony, it meant everything. Her heart thundered in her chest, not out of fear for herself, because she knew she was innocent, but for what this arrest symbolized. She had dedicated her life to reforming the very prejudices she was now being subjected to. And now, she was about to become another example of the system's failure. By dawn, Ebony had been booked at a local precinct. Her phone was confiscated, and her request to make a phone call was denied until procedures were completed. The night passed slowly in a cramped, foul-smelling holding cell. The walls were scarred with graffiti, and the air was thick with the stench of mildew and sweat. Ebony sat quietly in the corner, her mind racing. She tried to remain composed, holding on to belief that it was all a misunderstanding. Surely, it would be cleared up once she had the chance to explain. But something in her gut whispered otherwise. Not all judges are fair, and truth doesn't always find immediate vindication in a courtroom. Judge Hamilton Wright was well known in Fulton County's legal community. Appointed years ago, his name carried weight. Some praised his reputation for being tough on crime. Others, especially those who work behind closed doors, spoke in hushed tones about something darker. Rumors had long circulated regarding his bias, particularly against black defendants. Staff whispered of racially charged remarks, unusually high bail amounts, and a pattern of one-sided rulings. Ebony had observed him from the gallery on several occasions, quietly noting how his tone and body language would shift when addressing white versus black defendants. Never did she imagine she would be standing before him as one of those defendants. But now, dressed in the same rumpled gray suit she had worn the night before, Ebony stood behind the podium in courtroom 4D. She had no legal counsel beside her. She had assumed reasonably that the baseless charge of resisting an investigation would be thrown out immediately. There was no probable cause, no crime committed. How could something so flimsy survive an arraignment? Miss Ebony Jacobs, Judge Wright said, his cold, hawk-like eyes flickering as he glanced over her case file. You stand accused of obstructing a police officer in the course of his duties. His voice boomed through the courtroom, heavy and resonant. Do you have representation? Ebony cleared her throat. Your Honor, I was unfairly. Do you have representation? He repeated, more sternly. She shook her head. I haven't had the opportunity to contact an attorney. Your Honor, I was... Then I suggest you obtain one, Judge Wright said sharply. This court does not look favorably on self-representation in criminal matters. Ebony considered informing him that she was, in fact, a licensed attorney admitted to the Georgia State Bar, but she held back, sensing that such a revelation might only provoke further hostility. Yes, Your Honor, I would like to request a continuance to secure counsel. For a brief moment, something flickered in the judge's eyes, something disturbingly close to satisfaction. Request for continuance is noted. However, this court retains discretion in setting bail based on the nature of the charges. He leaned forward slightly. Officer Reinhardt alleges that you refused lawful orders and behaved aggressively. That behavior may indicate a risk to the community. Ebony's stomach twisted. A risk to the community? Over a routine traffic stop that had been escalated without cause? Your Honor, I have no criminal history. I hold a stable position within the governor's office. There is no evidence that I pose any threat. Nevertheless, Judge Wright interrupted, you are charged with resisting a lawful investigation. Bail is set at $10,000. Next case. A wave of disbelief swept through her. $10,000 for a first-time offense based on an officer's unsubstantiated claim. Justice, she now realized, had a price tag, and prejudice had just set the rate. There was no evidence of violence, nothing to justify such a steep bail. Ebony knew that the typical amount for a misdemeanor, if it even qualified as one in this case, was far lower. A lump formed in her throat, but she squared her shoulders. She refused to be intimidated. She might have to post bail, but she had the means. She wouldn't sit in a cell and let a biased system chip away at her resolve. Judge Wright banged his gavel with finality, and Ebony was escorted from the courtroom by a bailiff. As she walked through the courthouse corridor, staff members cast curious glances. Ebony Jacobs, the governor's right-hand legal advisor, behind bars? No one recognized her yet, but Ebony had a sinking feeling that Judge Wright would do everything within his power to keep her identity under wraps and prevent any possibility of vindication. She needed legal reinforcements, and fast. Once released on bail, Ebony immediately contacted two trusted allies, Amanda Persing, a renowned civil rights attorney, and Samuel Lee, the governor's deputy chief of staff. They convened at a quiet cafe near the Martin Luther King Jr. Federal Building, settling into a secluded corner table for privacy. Amanda, a slender woman in her late 40s with curly brown hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, had a long track record challenging systemic bias. She was best known for winning a landmark case on racial profiling during traffic stops. As Ebony recounted the events of her arrest, Amanda's expression turned cold with anger. This is brazen, Amanda said, voice sharp. They had no probable cause to search you, let alone arrest you. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They're trying to intimidate you. Samuel, dressed in a crisp navy suit, the unofficial uniform of the governor's senior aides, listened intently, his jaw clenched. He had known Ebony since law school, and he rarely wore emotion on his face. The governor will be furious when he hears, Samuel said. He's out of state at a conference, but once he's back, he'll want to act fast. Ebony nodded, exhaling with some relief. I appreciate that, she said. But before we involve the governor directly, I want to do this right. We need a clear timeline, solid documentation, from the traffic stop to Judge Wright's excessive bail ruling. I have a strong suspicion this isn't an isolated incident. Amanda tapped her pen against her notepad. I'll file a motion to dismiss, but I doubt Judge Wright will entertain it. If we can gather evidence of consistent bias, we'll take this to the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Then she paused, her tone cautious. But Ebony, are you ready for how ugly this could get? They'll dig into your personal life, your professional record, everything. They'll try to discredit you. A flicker of doubt crossed Ebony's face. She had spent years cultivating her credibility, building her reputation from the ground up. She was proud of the criminal justice reforms she helped shape. But now, her work and character could become ammunition for political warfare. Still, she looked Amanda square in the eyes. Yes, I'm prepared. This fight is bigger than me. If we don't push back, we're saying it's okay for people like Judge Wright to keep bending the system to their will. Just then, Ebony's phone buzzed. The caller ID was restricted, typically a sign of a high-level government line. Her pulse quickened as she answered. It was one of the governor's senior advisors. Word of her arrest had reached the executive office. Ebony listened quietly, then spoke with calm precision. Don't worry, she said after a pause. I'll handle the legal side. I'll keep you updated. She hung up and turned to Amanda and Samuel. It's official. The governor's staff knows. They expect me to keep them in the loop, but for now, it's business as usual, at least in public. Amanda checked her watch. I should head to the courthouse to file those motions. Ebony, if you can get access to any dash cam footage or body cam recordings from that stop, we'll need them immediately. Body cam footage from a night of your arrest is critical, Amanda said. If we get visual evidence that contradicts Officer Reinhardt's claims of aggressive behavior, his entire account will collapse. Samuel stood, adjusting his tie with precision. I'll work the political angle, he added. See if there are any back channels that can help expedite getting that footage. Ebony nodded, masking the nervous flutter in her stomach. She was profoundly grateful to have allies who believed in her, but she also understood the scope of the battle ahead. A powerful judge with a history of questionable ethics, a police officer possibly covering his tracks, and a legal system that too often treated black defendants as guilty until proven innocent. Still, her resolve remained unshaken, a steel blade yet to be drawn. She would fight, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been crushed beneath the weight of injustice. 2 days later, Ebony stepped onto the polished marble floors of the governor's office. The Capitol building buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Secretaries rushing with paperwork, interns dashing between meetings, aides murmuring updates about the governor's upcoming healthcare reform press conference. As she passed, most staffers offered polite nods, though a few cast lingering glances. Clearly, rumors of her arrest had begun to circulate. Governor Alexander McKinley, tall and broad-shouldered, greeted her with a firm handshake. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his face bore the concern of a leader facing unwelcome news. He guided her into a private room lined with framed portraits of past governors. As he closed the door, his expression turned grave. I've heard about your situation, he said, gesturing for her to sit in a high-backed leather chair. To say I'm shocked is an understatement. You've always been one of the most committed, diligent advocates for justice I've known. This whole incident reeks. Ebony nodded, shoulders tense. She recounted every detail. Her traffic stop, the unfounded accusations, the unreasonably high bail, and Judge Wright's dismissive conduct. The governor listened carefully, fingers pressed to his chin. I've had concerns about Wright before, he admitted. But he's always been careful, slippery enough to avoid formal scrutiny. No one's ever nailed him with solid evidence. We're gathering everything, Ebony said, her voice steady. Body cam footage, dash cam recordings. There has to be something that disproves Reinhardt's version of events. And once we have that, we can highlight how Judge Wright used that baseless claim to justify an excessive bail. This could expose a pattern. Governor McKinley leaned in. You realize once we move against an acting judge, it becomes a media spectacle. The press will feed on every detail, truth or rumor. I stand behind you, Ebony, 100%, but I need to know that you're prepared for the backlash this could cause. Ebony exhaled slowly. I've thought it through. I am ready. This isn't just about my reputation. It's about everyone who's been wronged by this system. If I can help fix it, I must. The governor smiled, warm and reassuring. I always knew you were special. You're the reason I believe in our reform agenda. That you've now become a victim of the very system we're trying to change. It's painful, but maybe it's a catalyst we need. He stood, signaling the meeting's close. Keep me updated. I'll work behind the scenes to pressure law enforcement to release the footage. I trust you to lead this. Speak to the press if you must. But tread carefully. Judge Wright is calculating. He'll twist your words if he gets the chance. Be bold but strategic. As Ebony exited the room, a buoyant sense of purpose filled her. The governor was on her side. He believed in her, and he wasn't going to let corruption in the judiciary go unanswered. Clutching her laptop bag tightly, she thought of the half-written reform bill still saved on her desktop. One question burned in her mind. How many others had Judge Wright steamrolled with unchecked power? Amanda Persing called Ebony with urgency in her voice. Meet me at my office as soon as you can. Ebony didn't hesitate. She navigated congested downtown traffic until she reached a multi-story law building where Amanda's firm was located. She took the elevator to the 15th floor and stepped into a modern space marked by minimalist decor and a frosted glass door reading Persing and Associates. Amanda was waiting in the conference room with a tight smile and documents already spread across a dark mahogany table. You're not going to believe this, Amanda said, tapping a stack of papers. I submitted a formal request for the dash cam and body cam footage. The police department responded that all relevant files were lost due to technical errors. Ebony's jaw tightened. Convenient, she replied, her voice sharp with sarcasm. So that's their story? There's more, Amanda continued, flipping to another page. I also subpoenaed Officer Reinhardt's disciplinary records. He has multiple complaints filed against him, excessive force, racial profiling. But none of them advanced to formal charges. Why? Lack of evidence. Missing footage. It's a pattern. Ebony sank into a chair, her fists clenched. A familiar surge of frustration and anger rose within her. They're sweeping it under the rug. Again. Amanda's eyes flashed. Not if we can help it. I've filed a motion compelling the police to produce any backup copies or archive files. IT departments often store footage in multiple locations. If they're lying about the loss, that could be grounds for sanctions. Ebony let out a shaky breath and rubbed her temples. What about the hearing? Any updates from Judge Wright's chambers? Amanda nodded, her expression grim. Yes, we've been scheduled for a preliminary hearing next week. They're moving fast, too fast. It almost feels like Judge Wright is trying to railroad this case before we can gather the evidence needed to clear your name. A heavy silence settled between them. Ebony's mind wandered to the countless individuals who had endured similar injustices. People who didn't have a skilled attorney, access to high-level government support, or a relentless friend like Amanda. How many have been quietly broken by these tactics because they lacked the power to resist? Before Amanda could speak again, the office phone rang. She answered it quickly, then turned back to Ebony, eyes wide with surprise. That was one of my associates. You won't believe this. A witness came forward. She filmed part of your arrest on her smartphone, said she recognized your name from a local news segment and felt compelled to share. Ebony's eyes lit up with cautious hope. That's huge. If it's real, And if it captures Reinhardt's misconduct, Amanda's lips curve into a triumphant smile. Then we could blow this case wide open. I'm arranging a meeting with her immediately. This might be the crack in their armor we've been waiting for. Ebony stood, filled with renewed purpose. I'll notify the governor's office. If this footage is legit, they might be able to help verify its authenticity faster. Amanda, this is it. We're not backing down. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived quicker than expected. Courtroom 4D buzzed with quiet tension. Outside, a group of reporters hovered in the hallway, whispering about Ebony's role in the governor's office. The media had picked up the story and framed it as a battle over police overreach and judicial bias. At the defense table, Amanda stood firmly beside Ebony. Across the aisle, Officer Reinhardt sat stiffly in the witness row, clad in a dark uniform gleaming with medals. Judge Wright swept into the courtroom, his black robe billowing like a cloak of authority. All rise, the bailiff announced. The room stood. Be seated, Judge Wright commanded, his voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. He eyed Ebony with a cold, unreadable expression before turning to address the court. We are here for a preliminary hearing to determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed with charges of resisting a police investigation and obstruction. Counselors, please state your appearances, Judge Wright instructed. Amanda announced herself first, followed by the assistant district attorney, a composed young woman named Karen Hullum. The judge nodded and invited the prosecution to present its evidence. Hullum called Officer Reinhardt to the stand. Under oath, he delivered a rehearsed, carefully constructed narrative. He claimed Ebony had been driving erratically, refused to provide proper documentation, and became belligerent when asked to exit the vehicle. He further asserted that he smelled alcohol and insisted that Ebony cursed at him and resisted arrest. Amanda's eyes narrowed as she listened. This was the same version of events Ebony had consistently denied. The stench of falsehood clung to every word. When it was time for cross-examination, Amanda stood with calm authority. Officer Reinhardt, can you explain why there is no dash cam or body cam footage of this incident? She asked, her voice even but laced with sharp intent. The officer's jaw tightened. Technical malfunction. All the files were corrupted. Amanda allowed a pause to linger in the air, then produced a stack of documents. And is it not true that you've been the subject of multiple complaints involving missing footage during arrests of black motorists? She asked. Judge Wright frowned. Ms. Persing, we are not here to try Officer Reinhardt's entire history. Keep your questions relevant to this case. Amanda didn't flinch. Your Honor, I'm establishing pattern. Repeated claims of lost footage under questionable circumstances go directly to the credibility of this witness. Hullum objected, and Judge Wright sustained, barring Amanda from probing further into the officer's record. Then it was Ebony's turn to testify. She delivered her account clearly and confidently. She described her immediate compliance with the officer's requests, the unfounded claim that she smelled of alcohol, the prolonged and invasive search, and ultimately, her wrongful arrest. Though she spoke with the measured tone of a seasoned legal professional, the strain in her voice revealed the emotional toll of the ordeal. Judge Wright leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Ms. Jacobs, it appears we have a matter of your word against Officer Reinhardt, given the lack of official footage. Before Ebony could respond, Amanda interjected. Your Honor, we have a witness who recorded a portion of the encounter on her smartphone. She is present in the courtroom and ready to testify. A hush fell over spectators. Officer Reinhardt visibly stiffened. Judge Wright's expression hardened as he peered down at Amanda. Has this footage been authenticated? He asked, his tone skeptical. We're in the process of verifying its authenticity, Amanda replied. However, we believe it is compelling and relevant for the purposes of this preliminary hearing. The judge exchanged a glance with ADA Hullum, who looked caught off guard. After a pause, he said, We'll allow the witness to speak. But let me be clear. If this footage cannot be verified, it will carry little weight in this courtroom. The witness, a middle-aged woman named Linda Harper, took the stand. Clutching her phone nervously, she nonetheless spoke with clarity and conviction. She described driving past the scene and noticing a tense interaction between a police officer and a civilian. Concerned, She began recording. She recalled seeing Ebony standing still, her hands visible, while the officer appeared increasingly agitated. Amanda received the phone and played the video for court. Though the audio was muffled, the footage clearly showed Ebony remaining calm while Officer Reinhardt raised his voice, barking commands and accusing her of smelling like alcohol. The video also captured Ebony repeatedly asking for clarification, requests that went unanswered. The courtroom fell into stillness as the video played. Everyone in the courtroom absorbed every second of the video. Ebony fought back a surge of relief as the truth began to surface. Still, Judge Wright's demeanor shifted, from aloof to visibly irritated. He cleared his throat. We'll recess for 15 minutes while I review this footage in chambers. Court is adjourned until then. Ebony and Amanda exchanged hopeful glances, while Officer Reinhardt's shoulders visibly slumped. They had cracked open a sliver of doubt in the prosecution's story. But Ebony knew better than to assume they'd won anything yet. Judge Wright had a reputation for entrenching himself in his positions, and she suspected he'd do everything in his power to either discredit the footage or dismiss it as incomplete. During the recess, Ebony sat quietly in the corridor alongside Amanda and Linda Harper. Nearby, a cluster of reporters loitered, eager for statements. Linda looked uneasy, her hands trembling slightly. "I just want to do the right thing," she said. "I can't stand the idea of injustice going unchecked." Amanda placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're brave for coming forward. This footage could be a turning point." Ebony nodded, gratitude flickering in her eyes. "You did more than most ever would." 15 minutes turned into 30, then 40. Finally, a bailiff emerged and summoned everyone back into the courtroom. Judge Wright returned to the bench, his expression impassive as the crowd settled. Officer Reinhardt had resumed his seat beside the ADA. Clearing his throat, the judge began. "Having reviewed the footage in my chambers, I find the content inconclusive. It captures only a brief portion of the encounter, and the audio lacks clarity. It does not categorically disprove the officer's account." Ebony swallowed hard. She had expected this outcome, but the disappointment still landed like a punch to the gut. Amanda rose to respond. "Your Honor, this footage clearly shows that Miss Jacobs was calm and compliant, completely contradicting Officer Reinhardt's claims of belligerence. That contradiction is significant." Judge Wright raised his hand. "Counselor, I said the footage is inconclusive, not irrelevant. Nevertheless, for the purposes of this preliminary hearing, I find that the prosecution has met its burden of establishing probable cause to proceed to trial." A murmur of frustration rippled through the courtroom. Ebony clenched her fist beneath the table, her anger simmering just below the surface. The judge continued. "The trial will be scheduled for next month. Until then, Miss Jacobs, your bail conditions remain in effect. Any violation will result in immediate revocation." He banged his gavel. The hearing was over. Ebony exhaled slowly, emotion swirling, anger, frustration, and a deep sense of betrayal by the very system she had spent her career working to reform. As she gathered her belongings, Amanda leaned over and whispered, "Don't be discouraged. This was progress. We'll push for a forensic analysis of the video. We'll get expert testimony. We're not done." Ebony nodded, forcing a faint smile. "We're in for a fight, but I'm ready." Later that afternoon, back at Amanda's office, Ebony, Amanda, and Samuel Lee gathered around a large oval conference table. A projector displayed documents on the wall, sworn affidavits from people who had experienced similar mistreatment by Officer Reinhardt and questionable sentencing by Judge Wright. Amanda's team had spent weeks digging through public records, local news archives, and social media. The patterns were undeniable. Multiple cases showed black men and women being charged with minor infractions, then receiving harsh penalties. In many of those cases, Officer Reinhardt was the arresting officer, and Judge Wright presided over the trial. The synergy was too blatant to be coincidence. Flipping through the thick dossier, Samuel looked grim. "My God, look at this." James Price, arrested for a broken taillight, ended up serving 3 months for resisting arrest. Meanwhile, a nearly identical case with a white defendant. An identical case with a white defendant had ended with nothing more than a small fine. Ebony felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just misconduct. It was systemic corruption, a vicious cycle in which an officer with a history of racial profiling funneled defendants into a courtroom ruled by a biased judge. Together, they upheld each other's narratives, reinforcing injustice while leaving defendants virtually powerless. Amanda slid another file across the table. There's also a pattern of conveniently lost footage. Over a dozen incidents where Officer Reinhart reported dash cam or body cam malfunctions. It's highly suspect. And in every one of those cases, Judge Wright issued sentences that were far harsher than standard. Ebony's mind raced. We need to get those past defendants to come forward as witnesses. This case can't just be about me. If we can show a consistent pattern, we might have grounds to request a civil rights investigation from the Department of Justice. Samuel nodded. The governor will back that move, but we need rock-solid evidence. Allegations alone won't be enough to topple a sitting judge. That's why I've hired a private investigator, Amanda said. They're looking for any possible dashcam backups. Sometimes files survive on cloud servers or in technical archives. I've also contacted the local news station that originally reported on some of these arrests. They may have used footage or interviews that could support our case. Ebony stood, unable to sit still. She paced the conference room, her thoughts racing. Judge Wright hides behind the facade of being tough on crime. Officer Reinhart hides behind his badge and a string of technical failures. But all it takes is one undeniable piece of evidence to bring it crashing down. Let's not forget, Amanda added gently. They'll fight back with everything they have, including attacking you. They'll paint this as a personal vendetta. They'll accuse you of using your political connections to dodge accountability. Are you ready for that? Ebony took a long, steady breath. I am. It's terrifying, but I'm not backing down. This is why I joined the governor's team in the first place, to expose corruption and fight for reform. If we win, we won't just help me. We'll help everyone who's ever suffered under this broken system. Her fears were realized within days that a local tabloid-style news outlet published a sensational article alleging that Ebony Jacobs had ties to criminal networks. The piece pointed to a former childhood friend who had served time for drug possession, implying that Ebony was somehow involved. The claim was baseless. She hadn't spoken to the man in years, and there was no evidence connecting her to any wrongdoing. But the damage was done. Social media exploded with speculation. Her inbox was flooded with hateful messages. Some trolls even claimed her arrest for obstruction was just the beginning of a deeper web of corruption. Ebony struggled to stay composed amid the chaos. Amanda urged her to release a firm public statement to counter the smear. Samuel coordinated with the governor's press team, helping draft a response that emphasized Ebony's track record, her service to the state, and her unwavering commitment to justice. It also reiterated her legal fight against unjust accusations. Judge Wright, however, escalated matters. From the bench, he made an offhand remark questioning Ebony's ongoing commitment to lawful conduct. The comment was quickly picked up by reporters and turned into a front-page headline. The implication was unmistakable. If a judge questioned her integrity, maybe the accusations had merit. Amanda reacted immediately. She filed a motion to have Judge Wright recused from the case, citing clear judicial bias in both speech and conduct. The motion referenced specific patterns of disproportionate sentencing and inflammatory comments. In response, Judge Wright simply scheduled a hearing to review the motion and assigned himself to preside over it, allowing him to judge his own partiality. Ebony received a hearing notice while working at the governor's office. Samuel handed her the letter, shaking his head in disbelief. He's not even pretending to be impartial, he said. Ebony let out a bitter laugh. He thinks his authority is untouchable. I can't wait to see how he tries to justify this. Governor McKinley, just stepping out of a meeting, overheard their conversation and walked over. If you need an official statement from me, you have it, he said firmly. This is an egregious conflict of interest. Presiding over a motion that challenges his own bias? If that's not a miscarriage of justice, I don't know what is. Ebony was touched by the governor's support and thanked him, but she knew better than to rely solely on moral outrage. Only solid, indisputable evidence would force Judge Wright to step aside. She and Amanda had placed their hopes on the private investigator's search for dash cam backups or new testimonies from others harmed by the same pattern of misconduct. Still, Ebony refused to be intimidated. As the recusal hearing approached, she prepared meticulously, gathering statistics on racial disparities in sentencing and compiling documented cases of conveniently missing footage tied to Officer Reinhardt. If Judge Wright wanted a confrontation, she was ready to meet him head-on. The hearing was tense from the outset. Judge Wright sat high behind his bench, cloaked in a facade of neutrality. But subtle flickers in his expression betrayed the resentment simmering beneath the surface. Amanda began her argument, laying out a detailed list of reasons why the judge should recuse himself. His history of questionable rulings against black defendants, his dismissive remarks toward Ebony, and his disturbingly consistent alignment with Officer Reinhardt. She cited legal precedents in which judges had stepped aside for far less. Judge Wright listened in stony silence, occasionally interrupting to challenge her assertions. At one point, he leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Miss Persing, are you directly accusing me of racial bias? That's a serious charge." Amanda met his gaze without hesitation. "Your record demonstrates a clear and consistent pattern of imposing harsher penalties on defendants of color. Ms. Jacobs's case exemplifies this. A mysterious disappearance of evidence, a disproportionate bail, and ongoing prejudicial comments from the bench. I'm not making assumptions, Your Honor. The facts speak for themselves." The judge glanced toward the ADA, who, sensing the gravity of the moment, maintained a carefully neutral expression. Hullum gave a brief diplomatic statement, saying the state had seen no explicit proof of racial bias, but would defer to the court's ruling. It was a calculated move, one that allowed the state to preserve neutrality if recusal was granted, or proceed as normal if it wasn't. Once Amanda concluded, Judge Wright tapped his fingers against the bench. "This court has heard your arguments. However, a judge cannot be recused simply because a defense attorney disagrees with prior rulings. I have served with integrity and impartiality for years. I see no legitimate basis for recusal." Motion denied. A wave of disbelief and frustration swept through the defense's side of the courtroom. Ebony's pulse pounded in her ears. Amanda rose immediately to state for the record that they would be appealing the decision to a higher court. Judge Wright scowled deepened at the announcement, as if Ebony and her team were unruly subjects daring to challenge his authority. Outside the courtroom, Amanda and Ebony huddled in hushed conversation. "We expected this," Amanda said, her face flushed with restrained anger. "We'll file the appeal. It'll take time, but it's our best shot at getting him removed before trial." Ebony nodded, her jaw tight. "I'm not surprised he refused to step down. But every move he makes just proves our point. He's digging his own grave." As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Cameras flashed, microphones extended. Ebony stepped forward and delivered a brief but composed statement. Acknowledging the motion's denial, Ebony reaffirmed her unwavering commitment to proving the case was rooted in injustice. Reporters pressed for details, but she remained composed and cautious. She had learned long ago that every word would be dissected, quoted, and used either for or against her. Just as she and Amanda were about to exit the courthouse, Ebony's phone vibrated. The name of the private investigator lit up the screen. She stepped aside quickly to answer. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "That's incredible news. Email us the files as soon as possible." Amanda noticed a shift in Ebony's expression and raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "They found it," Ebony whispered, hope radiating across her face. One of the police department's backup servers wasn't fully scrubbed. The investigator recovered partial dash cam footage from my arrest. If it's authentic, it could prove Officer Reinhardt lied. A spark reignited in Amanda's eyes. "Let's get it authenticated immediately. This might be the silver bullet we've been waiting for." Outside, the press continued to swarm, but Ebony now felt a powerful surge of determination coursing through her veins. Judge Wright may have won the battle over recusal, but they were armed with something far more powerful, the truth. And this time, it had a timestamp. By late evening, Ebony and Amanda were back in Amanda's office. The lights were dimmed to reduce screen glare. The private investigator sat beside them, transferring the newly discovered footage to a laptop. Nervous tension crackled in the room. The file began to play. Shot from the dash cam of Officer Reinhardt's cruiser. The footage was partially corrupted. Some frames missing, static distorting the audio, but enough was intact to reveal a damning sequence. Ebony's vehicle was fully stopped, signals functioning properly. Officer Reinhardt approached. From the audio, clear bursts captured Ebony calmly handing over her license and registration. Her voice was polite. She never raised her tone. She complied fully. There was no mention of alcohol, no indication of erratic driving, no belligerence. Reinhardt's aggression, however, was undeniable. He threatened her with arrest almost immediately, citing her attitude, despite her composure. In a chilling moment, he radioed another officer. "I have a belligerent driver here," even as the video captured Ebony's steady, respectful tone. It was a smoking gun. Amanda paused the video and replayed that segment several times, her jaw tightening. "This is outright fabrication," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "He told dispatch you were belligerent, while the footage proves you were completely cooperative." Ebony blinked back tears. This wasn't just personal vindication. It was justice for every person wronged by the same manipulation. "We need to get this verified immediately," she said. "Let's bring in forensic experts. Confirm the timestamps, the cruiser ID, make sure it hasn't been altered." The investigator nodded. "I'll handle it." So far, the metadata matches Reinhardt's dashcam logs. No signs of external tampering. Amanda stood, pacing. "Once we have the expert analysis, we'll file an emergency motion to dismiss the charges. But we won't stop there. We'll demand a full-scale investigation into Officer Reinhardt's conduct. That alone will put Judge Wright under scrutiny for how he's handled your case, and likely dozens of others." Ebony sat still for a moment, her mind racing with the weight of what they'd uncovered. "This could be the beginning of something bigger," she said softly. "A real opportunity to expose corruption and maybe even free people who should have never been behind bars." "Yes," Amanda agreed, her voice firm. "And once the governor hears about this, he'll bring the full weight of his office to bear. We have to move carefully, methodically." Ebony nodded. "Get the footage analyzed. Then we fight. Authenticate the file the motions, and then unleash the political pressure." A new sense of hope pulsed through Ebony's veins. She remembered the sting of that traffic stop, the cold metal of the handcuffs clamped around her wrists. But now she had something tangible, something that not only proved her innocence, but revealed how the system had been rigged against her from the start. The puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. That night, Ebony barely slept. She kept replaying the footage in her mind, imagining how it would unravel the false narrative Officer Reinhardt had spun. She pictured Judge Wright's stony expression faltering beneath the weight of undeniable truth. This was the moment she had been fighting for, a chance not just to clear her name, but to challenge an entire system built on injustice. 1 week later, Ebony's motion to dismiss landed in Judge Wright's courtroom. The hearing was standing room only, filled with reporters, community activists, and curious onlookers. The air buzzed with tension, as if a single spark could ignite it. Amanda presented the newly authenticated dash cam footage, supported by a certified forensic expert who testified to its legitimacy. The courtroom watched in rapt silence as the video played. Ebony, calm and cooperative. Officer Reinhardt, agitated and accusatory. His claims of belligerence rang hollow against the visual proof. Whispers surged through the crowd. Ebony's heart pounded in her chest, echoing in her ears. Judge Wright's face darkened. His fingers gripped the edge of his bench. The footage was damning. No bias or twisted reasoning could recast Ebony as aggressive. Next to her, Amanda stood firm, calling for immediate dismissal and perjury charges against Officer Reinhardt. A ripple of approval swept through the gallery. Pressing his lips into a thin line, Judge Wright attempted to maintain control. "This is highly unusual evidence to appear at this stage," he said, trying to sound measured. "The court will need to review its authenticity." "It's already been verified by 2 separate forensic experts," Amanda countered, her voice steady and unwavering. The metadata aligns with the police department's own logs. This footage is genuine, Your Honor. Officer Reinhardt lied under oath, and Miss Jacobs has suffered a baseless prosecution. The assistant district attorney rose, visibly flustered. Given this new evidence, the state concedes there may be insufficient grounds to proceed. We request a continuance to review the materials further. Amanda cut in without hesitation. We request immediate dismissal, Your Honor. There's nothing left to review. The so-called probable cause was built on false testimony. The courtroom erupted in low conversation. Judge Wright's expression tightened, the internal battle clearly visible. If he pushed forward, it would be impossible to ignore that he was disregarding direct, verified proof of Ebony's innocence. After a long pause, he cleared his throat. Charges are dismissed. A wave of relief surged through Ebony. But the day's triumph wasn't over. Amanda stepped forward, motion in hand. Your Honor, we also request a formal investigation into Officer Reinhardt's conduct. And in addition, we are filing a request with the Judicial Qualifications Commission to review your handling of Miss Jacobs' case. The missing footage, the excessive bail, your refusal to recuse despite clear bias. These matters demand scrutiny. Judge Wright's eyes flashed with anger. Counselor, that is outside the scope of this proceeding. Actually, Your Honor, Amanda replied calmly, Georgia law permits any party to file with the Judicial Qualifications Commission at any time. We are simply stating for the record that we are doing so here in open court. The tension snapped. Judge Wright's voice trembled with fury as he slammed the gavel. This hearing is adjourned. He stood abruptly, nearly toppling his chair, and stormed out of the courtroom. Outside, the press mobbed Ebony and Amanda, microphones and cameras thrust forward, capturing Ebony's radiant expression. How do you feel about your victory today? One reporter called out. How does it feel to have your name cleared? Shouted a reporter. Ebony smiled, her voice resonating with quiet conviction. I'm relieved, of course. But this isn't just about me. We now have evidence of systemic misconduct that must be addressed for the protection of everyone who walks into a courtroom. Less than an hour later, the governor held a hastily arranged press conference on the steps of the Capitol. Standing beside Ebony and Amanda, Governor McKinley announced a formal review of Officer Reinhardt's conduct and expressed strong support for a broader investigation into Judge Wright's rulings. The crowd erupted in applause as the governor embraced Ebony, affirming his faith in her integrity and commending her bravery. In the days that followed, karmic justice struck swiftly. Under mounting scrutiny, Officer Reinhardt was placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation. Inspired by Ebony's victory, other victims of his misconduct came forward with similar accounts. Meanwhile, the Judicial Qualifications Commission launched a sweeping review of Judge Wright's rulings, focusing on cases marked by unusually harsh sentences and questionable evidence. The final blow came when an ethics panel found substantial cause to believe Judge Wright had violated judicial conduct codes. Facing removal, he submitted his resignation in a somber public statement. The man who once ruled with unchecked authority now exited in disgrace, forced to step down under a cloud of scandal. For Ebony, the aftermath was both validating and sobering. She remained fully committed to her role in the governor's administration, working tirelessly on legislation to increase transparency and accountability within the justice system. Her story became a symbol, shared by activists, journalists, and citizens alike, as a call to action for meaningful reform. Ebony's triumph was a powerful testament to truth, courage, and unity. While a corrupt judge and dishonest officer were removed from power, she knew the broader fight for justice was far from over. But for now, she could rest, secure in the knowledge that she had stood her ground and prevailed. Thank you for watching this powerful story of persistence, truth, and undeniable justice. If you were moved by Ebony's fight and inspired by her ability to hold power accountable, this is just the beginning. Real change happens when we stand united against corruption and support those who dare to speak out. Right now, you could be part of that change. Please like this video if it inspired you. Share it with friends, family, and everyone who believes in justice, so they, too, can witness Ebony's incredible journey. And most importantly, Subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and triumph. Together, we will keep shining a light on injustice, no matter how powerful its perpetrators may be.